housing's not as expensive as it's made out to be. So I see all this content across my feed of all these TikTokers and news people going,
well, if we look at the average home in America, it's sitting around $400,000, and at a 7% interest rate, you would need to make
the average cost of a house in America is $450,000, and the median income is $50,000. That you can't qualify for a loan. And then people going on TikTok going,
I will never be able to afford a house.
Oh my God, I love going to work and working full time and still not being able to afford a house.
Every single day I wake up and fight the urge to buy something. It could be something as small as like a pack of gum to a $500 pair of boots. I just can't help it.
Essentially, as a single, you're absolutely fucking drowning financially. As a single 29-year-old.
I can't afford anything. Like, it's not fair. Like, so I have a couple problems with all of this content. Firstly, average doesn't mean shit. And I'll get into that shortly. But average is just a bullshit measure of central tendency that is a poor representation of what's going on in the central behavior because it is very easily skewed by extremes. Think, for example, New York City and LA home prices. Secondly, this rhetoric and this content is poisonous, and it is, the promulgators of it are the worst fucking people I've ever seen. So let's get started. So when people talk about this on TikTok and on the internet and everything, they dress it up as having a goal to make people feel less ashamed of themselves for not having the same socioeconomic status at 25 that their parents did or that boomers did. And fair, valid point. Boomers are insane. Boomers are the entitled generation. Boomers are retarded and they're out of touch and they don't know what they're talking about. But we've made the point to not be ashamed of ourselves and compare ourselves to the previous generation. So now it's time to stop complaining about that. Because no amount of looking back at boomers and what boomers had and what they had versus what we don't is going to get you anything, anywhere, anytime. But this content is so popular because, firstly, when people rattle off numbers really quickly, when they talk really fast and they rattle off numbers really quickly.
How much income do you need to qualify for a $400,000 house with a 7% interest rate? Well, it depends on your down payment and if you have any monthly debt. So if you get a $400,000 house and put 3% down at a 7% interest rate, your principal and interest would be $2,581 plus $700 for property taxes, homeowner insurance, and PMI, if you put down less than 20%, would be $3,281 out the door. In 1980, the median household income was $22,000 and the median home price was $47,000. That was only twice the yearly salary. And if you wanted to put down a 20% down payment and closing costs, it would cost you about $11,000, which is only half the yearly salary. So you have your 13% interest rates. Your monthly payment was $485 a month, which was only 26% of your gross income.
That's the first sign of low IQ, actually. It sounds like it's smart and it sounds like it's high IQ, but it's not. We can all read and Google numbers too, just like anybody else. In 2024, most people can just Google and read numbers. But it's interpreting those numbers that makes an actual point or gets you to arrive at a conclusion. This content also encourages people to sulk. So people will go about this and they'll feel emboldened to complain about house prices and all of that. In particular, people listen to this content. This content never proposes a solution. This content never encourages you to figure it out, check this out, try moving to this area, try doing this tactic for your money and all of that. All it does is say, average home price is too much, you won't qualify for a loan, and you can't afford it, and, frickin' boomers had it better. This is like a cesspool breeding ground for people to victimize themselves. And I hate using that because we've all been hearing that since like 2016 about, oh, you're not a victim and oh. But that's what people really are doing. And why are they doing this? Because it's easier to do that than to take accountability and say, okay, this is the way things are. On an individual level, the only things I can do is figure out how I can fucking get the house, get the money, get the anything else that I could want. What's more is that people have this psychodynamic where if one person complains about something and the next person feels more emboldened and more confident in whining and sulking in the victimhood, then everyone comes together and commiserates and has an echo chamber of whining and bitch moaning about this. This problem is so perfidious because it appeals to the lowest common denominator instinct. This instinct is one I mentioned in one of my other videos about how I started weightlifting, but it's essentially the laziness instinct. Our instinct to be lazy, both physically and cognitively and spiritually, because our brains tell us we're going to die if we don't conserve energy. It's much easier to whine about house prices and whine about whether or not boomers had it better and all of that than to get your money up, get your education up, get your skills up, and figure it out. So I want to make it clear here. So this part is the Marchese methods part, which is to see through this stuff as nonsense. Anytime any content leads you to a conclusion that, everything sucks and you can't do anything and you're not going to be able to afford this and that and the other thing and you're poor and blah, blah, blah. Anytime content leads you, or anything you see or anything anybody says leads you to a conclusion like that, it is poison. And you need to execute it from your mind, from your feed, from your spirit, from your immediate circle immediately. This content really does encourage you to just sulk and whine and bitch moan about being poor. Now, don't get me wrong. Things are much more challenging than they once were. And houses, obviously, the prices have gone up and so on and so forth. The income to house price ratio is drastically different than it once was. And I'm not giving you the boomer lecture about spending too much on coffees and $15 avocado toast or whatever. But at the same time, part of this is about habits and money and so on and so forth. Most incomes, yes, even without buying avocado toast, can't quite afford a home. But that's because most incomes are like $50,000 or less. Once you get past the $50,000 mark to $75,000 to $100,000 or something, that's when you can actually do this. So let's get into average here. So let's just start with this Googling the average cost of homes thing, right? Because that's what that fucking egghead does. When he Googles this, I don't know why it doesn't show up here, but the highlighted line that usually comes up that you read within 0.1 seconds, and then you tell yourself what a numbers runner you are.
Hi, Whoopi. I'm Freddie. I run numbers on the internet.
Because of the TikTok brain rot attention span. But if you just even investigate this just for like a fraction of a second here, you see that Zillow is saying 360 something thousand. Okay. Now that's a little different because Zillow is going based off the listings on its website, but that's fairly reliable. That makes sense. Zillow is the first place that most people go to sell their house or to buy a house. And then you look at Forbes, where it says, according to the census here. Okay. So right here, there's a discrepancy. There's the 360 something thousand, and then there's the 495,000. So who's got it right? So we're swearing up and down by averages, the avid this and the avid that, and the data and the, genius, calculations. But who's got it right here? This is too drastically different for you to be able to toss it up to differences in time frames or the difference between the census and the Zillow. This is too drastically different. This is a $130,000 difference. So right there, do you see how just spitting out numbers super fast is not the smart thing? Because you can arrange numbers in all different sorts of ways to make things, make whatever point you want, really. So that's the first part. The second part is the arithmetic mean. All right. So the way that they talk about average in these videos, the average home price is numerical. So I'm going to break down how numerical average is retarded, which is this right here. And then I'm going to get into how they hijack the use of numerical average to take advantage of the abstract thought or idea of average that most people have. Most people think of average as just kind of like a point at which, there's a cluster around it, set price, and that's the hovering point for most house prices. All right. So this might be a little bit intimidating. This might be a little fancy, right? But if you remember, average is just adding up all of the data points and then dividing by the number of data points, the count of the data points. Taking all the money that's priced of the houses, you're taking them all, and then you're splitting them up evenly amongst each house. You're redistributing the prices evenly across the board. Average is also kind of like a rate, right? $450,000 per one house. So that means per two houses, you have $900,000. So you could think of it as like a rate too. So what seems to be the problem with this? Well, the problem with arithmetic mean is that it is highly sensitive to extreme values. Meaning that a home price of $20 million or $30 million is going to drastically change, even if it's just one house, drastically change the average. Maybe not across the United States, but drastically change it in, say, even at the state level. So my first thought, whenever I see an average, particularly this average, is that are they accounting for the outliers or the skews, the extreme prices? And you can imagine that if they give the average price of a home across the United States as a whole, you can bet your bottom dollar that New York City and LA are drastically skewing that average. And that's exemplified right here. So for example, firstly, from the National Association of Realtors, okay, we have home prices by county. Now, yes, this is by county. So this means that these averages, these prices in the county are the average within the county. But what does that do for us? That rearranges these numbers to be drastically different. Specifically, take a look here. So I can't hover over it because then it does that thing with the map that, if you hover over the 56% there, it's only going to show the 56%. But take a look at that. 56.8% of counties in the United States have a home price between $150,000 and $350,000. So let's just take the midpoint of that. The midpoint of that is $250,000. So isn't that remarkable? We were just swearing up and down that the average cost of a home is $150,000, but in half the country, you could find a home for significantly less than that. Or how about this? There's the 26% or so for houses that are less than $150,000, which totals to about 80% of counties in the United States have home prices less than $350,000. And of that 80-something percent, 26% of them have a home price of less than $150,000 median. And you could just look at this visual here. Clearly, LA and New York are skewing it. I hover over Santa Clara County, California. We have $1.6 million median home value. Let's take a look at good old New York, Nassau County, Long Island. Let's see. New York City area, $1 million median. So very clearly, average is easily skewed. So now, some genius might give the counterpoint of, well, that median home price, then I'm a genius, so I use the median instead of the mean to better understand the middle value. So in short, the median number is the number at which 50% of the home prices are less than that median and 50% have a price greater than. Well, if anything, that just makes my case more, because if you have a median, say, of $450,000, that means that half of all homes are priced less than that. That means flip a coin, heads it's less than that, tails it's more than that. So if anything, that makes my point that there's a half and half chance you could find a home for cheaper. And there's probably, let's say, you know what, you could even probably take that further and say there's a quarter chance that I could find a house for less than $250,000. Furthermore, some other genius might be like, oh, well, that's why you use the standard deviation to see exactly what that range is. So the standard deviation you can think of as the average distance from the mean. How far off on average is each data point from the mean value? Now, I tried looking through all this data that they all swear up and down that they could find from the census and all that stuff, and I didn't quite find anything that represents even these averages. I don't know where they're getting this from. So I tried to find the averages, the standard deviations and all of that, but I couldn't. But let's give a good estimate for what a standard deviation would be for the average cost of a home, or the normal distribution of a home. So that would mean that let's give it $100,000. Okay, so one standard deviation is $100,000. So that means that if you have a normal distribution, so this is a representation of standard deviation and how that relates with mean and average. So this is that middle, mean or median. All right, this sigma here is the standard deviation symbol, the representation of it. And what do we have? Let's say there's that $450,000, and let's say we have that standard deviation of $100,000. So this means that in our hypothetical, 68% of homes have a price between $350,000 and $550,000. So that means you're equally as likely to find a house between $350,000 and $450,000 as you are to find a house between $450,000 and $550,000. Moreover, you still have a chance of finding a house for less than that with this 13.5%. That might seem small, but in a vast country like the United States, that's not too hard to find. The last representation I'll have as to why descriptive statistics are nonsense is this famous exercise here. This is called Anscombe's Quartet. It's a guy who came up with this. I think it's from like the 1700s or something. And this guy came up with these 4 data sets with exactly the same average, standard deviation, median, variance, correlation, and all of that. It has the exact same descriptive statistics. All right. So we even look here at this. These are the data sets, pretty straightforward, 10 points of X and Y. All right, and you take a look here and you go across and you see that most of the time, they're pretty much similar. All right, we have, 0.1 for data set 1 is 10 and 8.04, 10 and 9.14. Okay, that's all seems to make sense, right? It makes sense that these are all averages. All these numbers look close enough together. But this is what it looks like when you graph those data sets. How drastically different do they all look? All their values are very similar. All their descriptive statistics are exactly the same. But look at how different they look. Furthermore, look at how these data points form like a perfect line, and then just this one being off completely throws this linear regression line way off. So let's address some of the counterpoints, right? So somebody might say, well, I can't freaking move because of my freaking job. So let's go back to our map here. And I'm going to use New York State as an example because I'm familiar with New York State. I'm from New York. I've lived in Long Island, Cortland, Watertown, Buffalo. And I can tell you, even at the state level, just the state level alone, house prices are drastically different. So I'm zoomed in here on the New York City area because let's say somebody says, well, I can't freaking move because, so you're saying to move, but I freaking can't because my job is here. First of all, in 2024, you can get any job anywhere. And if you swear up and down that your job is like a job that's only in big populated areas, big city areas, you could just go to another city. So for example, let's say you work in the famous New York City finance area. Okay, so let's say you're right here, or let's even go to right there, New York County, which is the New York City County, or Manhattan, and so on and so forth. So you have a median home value of $1.19 million. Let's say you're one of those people who have exactly that home, or let's say let's say no matter what you seem to do, you cannot find a house for much less than that. If it is less than that, it's still like $600,000. Okay, so you can't move because of your job. Really? You can't move one county over here to Hudson County and drop your home price in half. Literally half. We have 1.19 million, then we have 593,000. So then somebody might say, well, that's too much of a freaking commute to New York City, and now my commute is too long. Moving one county over is not a commute too long. Second of all, in this New York City example, I promise you that you could live a block from your workplace and walk to work every day, and it'll still be a 30-minute commute. So what difference does it make if you have already a shitty commute versus a little bit more of a shitty one? 30, going from 20 minutes to 45 minutes, and so on and so forth. Furthermore, I'll take a 20-minute bump in commute if it means my house price goes from $1.19 million to $593,000. Let's move over to Buffalo. Buffalo is one of the bigger cities in New York State. I think it's got about 200-something, 200 to 400,000 people in it. Okay, Erie County, right here. You could work your cute little city girls, boss bitch city girl job in Buffalo and find a home for around $272,000. So now you could do the same job for a house price of $800,000 less. Oh, well, I can't move because that's too far from family and whatever. Okay, unless it's like your immediate family, you got to grow up and learn that as an adult, you're going to have to live away from your mom and dad. So furthermore, this Buffalo one, these house prices are in populated areas. Buffalo City area is a populated area. Erie County, I am in Erie County. Erie County is a populated area. And you're seeing these home prices drastically different. So you can move one county over and sacrifice a little bit of a commute bump up for a drastic reduction in your house price. You can grow up and move away from your parents because you're an adult. You don't need your parents around you all the time, every time. You could take a road trip every once in a while if you really want to see them. And the super cheap houses are still in relatively populated areas. It really is just New York City and California that are fucking this all up. So then it becomes, well, those houses are cheaper, but they're lower quality and they're falling apart and they're in bad neighborhoods and all that. Oh, okay. So now this isn't about I want to afford a home. This is about I want to afford a cutesy-dootsy, all prettied up, lolly-da home that's expensive and looks all pretty and cute and nice and is a place for me to pretend like I'm living in a movie scene or pretend like I'm living in a scene of Friends. Or, well, I want to live, the places in New York City are so nice, though. It's like, all right, because we want to live out this Sex in the City fantasy of living in Manhattan and having floor-to-ceiling windows in our apartment high-rises and having people over and drinking wine at night and having our little movie scenes or TV show scenes in our life. Really? So then this isn't about house prices for you. This isn't about I want to be able to afford a home. This is I want to be able to afford a nice cutesy-dootsy home that fulfills my Sex in the City bullshit fantasies while still doing the bare minimum on a job, on a career, on personal growth, on education growth, and so on and so forth. And just to really drive the point home, I'm going to show you an example of a home here for $289,000. 3 beds, 2 baths, 1,300 square feet in the Buffalo area. Let's take a look. Does that look like super low quality and so poor to you? If it does, then this problem for you is not that it's too cheap. This problem is that you are just a bourgeoisie little fucking bitch. That's a nice sized yard. Look at this interior. This is great to me. This is more than enough for me and my wife for $289,000. Maybe I wouldn't paint, maybe I wouldn't do that blue. Okay, so you got to repaint the walls or whatever. I'm not a carpet guy either, so I wouldn't do But do you see the point? Do you see the point? Even when people try to say, "Oh, see these houses aren't nice," they're actually more than enough. Just to show you that I'm not cherry picking houses. These were just recommended for me, just based on how I've been viewing stuff. Okay, we have another one here that looks appealing to me. I don't like that color wood, but this is more than enough. If it means I have a place to sleep and fucking shit for a better price than a fucking $500,000, $600,000, $700,000, then I'm gonna take it. So it's not like I'm cherry picking this either. And you could run this exercise all across, other places. I've ran this exercise across Texas. Texas is famously cheaper with real estate. So you can't say, well, I can't move. You can't say that the cheaper houses are in non-populated areas. And you can't say that the cheaper houses are always like way lower quality. So now the final weapon against me, the final checkmate against me is going to be, oh yeah? Well, the bank won't still give me a loan because I don't qualify. Ha! So here's the deal with this qualification thing. Firstly, these people love to make like they are, real warriors on the front lines of data and science and research because they can just read the same Google results as you. And they're really, speaking truth to power and fighting the good fight against those frickin' banks and corporations. And then what do they tell you? Oh, well, the banks won't let you qualify for a loan and all of that. So in other words, they're telling you, okay, but you should still subordinate yourself to the banks and all of that. And what does that mean? That means as follows. Whenever you offer a person or a store or whatever the prospect of you spending money with them or making them money, you are not subordinate to them. You are dominant in that you control everything that goes on because you're the one who's about to hand over your money. So this idea that you have to qualify for a bank loan is so bitchy and so ridiculous because banks don't make money unless they lend you money because they make money on the interest that you pay them. Now, that doesn't mean that the qualification thing isn't true. You could apply. There's probably some bank loans that I could apply for that I wouldn't qualify for. Okay. Even on those averages with the average salary, would I qualify for a $450,000 home loan? I don't know. But let's say I don't. I can find someone else who will qualify me because someone else wants my money. So they might have a specific exact qualification criteria, but they're also going to be flexible with it because they don't make money unless they lend money. So you might say, well, you have to qualify because otherwise it's too risky for them to lend you the money. First of all, they're risking what? $400,000 of their like 20 gazillion that they have? Not even. $400,000 of other people's money that they're lending you. It's not their money. That's how bank lending works, by the way. Banks don't lend you like their money. They lend you money from the accounts of everyone that's in there. That's why people say that all of banking would collapse if everyone at the same time would pull their money out. Because the money that you have in your account is just like made up there. They always have some in reserve to give to you if you pull it out. But if everybody pulls it out, then they're fucked. Because they don't even have that actual physical amount of money at all times to back that because they have tons of it in loans out. So all that's to say that it's no fucking risk to them. They don't give a shit. When they lend me for a home loan, they're lending me someone else's money, not theirs. So they don't give a shit. Furthermore, that's still even a fraction of a percent of the money that they actually have on hand. So what's more is that it's not even risky for them, because when they lend you the money to buy your house, just like with a car, they own the house. So if you stop paying and they lose money because you stop paying, they didn't lose money because they still retain the house and the value of the house. So they'll just kick you out and resell the house and get all their money back. And in some cases, even make money. Go figure, right? Okay, so what's the solution? Firstly, all these drastic changes in home prices is localized in time, meaning that over time, eventually, there's going to be all these changes and however it goes. I mean, reality is that these prices are just like made up anyway because of a fakely engineered economy of supply and demand and blah, blah, blah. But you have to wait it out a little. And while you're waiting it out, get your money the fuck up. So for example, I've had a job before where I was making $75,000 a year. After taxes, it was $58,000 a year, which came out to about $1,100 a week. So $4,400 and some change every month. So while making that money, I was able to save about $2,000 a month. I was positive $2,000 a month. Crazy concept, but the way I did that was that I lived fucking cheap. I rented cheap, and the argument about rent is the same with the argument over housing here. Depends on where you are. Average is fake, and, quit it with the Sex and the City fucking shit. You go on Facebook Marketplace, you go on, Airbnb or whatever, and you could find plenty of places that'll rent to you for under $1,000 a month. Almost anywhere. Except for maybe that fucking stupid New York City. So that's the way I did that. I lived cheap and I saved about $2,000 a month. With $2,000 a month saved, so that's about $24,000 a year. If I save that up for about 5 years, I come up with about $125,000. What's more is that in that 5-year time span, I'm also going to save more money every month because crazy concept, but maybe get better jobs and make moves to make more money at once. So let's say by the end of 5 to 7 years, I've got almost $200,000. I can make a $200,000 down payment on a house now. And why is that so important? Because that drastically reduces the amount of money you're going to pay in interest and also drastically reduces that monthly payment. But I want to demonstrate to you how crucial it is that the interest rates and all of that stuff make this all fake and made up anyway. So let's use this awful average and this awful average interest rate and use this calculator here. Okay, so we have this average home price, $450,000, and this interest rate of 7%, and this, let's just say, zero down payment to get exactly what it would be per month, paying both the price of the house and the interest. Okay, $3,000. So that's quite a bit. But watch how much you're actually paying just because of the interest. You're paying $1,700 more a month just in interest. That's throwing your fucking money away. You wouldn't even want to do this at the start. Forget even if the prices were good and so on and so forth. You wouldn't even want to fucking bother with this because this is throwing more money away than what you would renting. Right? You're throwing away $1,700 a month so that you can keep the $1,200 a month. But that $1,700 is much more than most rent. So you're throwing that away. You're throwing away money exponentially faster if you do this home lending bullshit. Let's see the difference with that one I saw earlier. What was it? $279,000? Okay. Let's do a 7% interest rate. So $1,800 a month. Still a little bit manageable. That's getting to be manageable. Let's say with zero. So if you were just paying this directly, you'd only be paying $775 a month. So this really doesn't have anything to do with, oh, you can't do this and you can't do that. And it has everything to do with banking is just a fucking scam in the first place. You know, is owning a home even really like worth it if you're throwing more money away anyway on interest than you are in rent? Mind you, too, that when you own a home, you don't own it. You're just renting from the United States government now because you're paying property taxes. So what is the solution? Let's say I went with that strategy I mentioned earlier. I got my 7% here and the $279. All right. Let's say my down payment was the $100,000. I worked really hard, you know, over the span of 3 to 5 years, and I managed to save up enough to put a good enough down payment. So let's say $100,000. That just reduced our monthly payment by $700. Let's try $125. And it decreases it only a little bit more. So what's the key takeaway here? The key takeaway here is that you're paying too much in interest. So what is actually the solution? The solution is this. Get your money up and get it up enough that you don't have to pay any of this bullshit interest in the first place on a cheap $200,000 to $350,000 house. Does that seem crazy? Oh, how am I ever going to come up with that kind of money? You got to get your money up. You got to do better with the job. The example that I just mentioned to you was at a job where I was making $75,000 a year. So you're going to have to suck it up fucking buttercup and live cheaply for a little while. I lived in a place that's cheap and it's actually not that bad and it doesn't even matter because I'm just here to shit and sleep, so to speak. So what does it matter? I got to keep the rent payment down as cheap as possible so that I could save up for the house in the future. Now, mind you, that was just on one person's salary, mine. So if you're doing this with your spouse, even if your spouse makes less, even if your spouse makes, I don't know, $40K a year, $50K a year, now you can save about $3,000 a month. As a matter of fact, you'll probably save about $3,500 a month because you're splitting things more now, but it's not quite 50-50 all the time and so on and so forth. So you have to suck it up, buttercup, for a few years. Get your fucking money up. Get promoted, get more education, do some sort of job, and try to hit that 6-figure mark, that $125,000 mark. And sure enough, in due time, if you're living cheaply and just working on whatever you got to work on, you'll be able to buy a house without interest rates in 5 to 10 years. So I'll say this. I'm not saying that it's easy to do what I just suggested. It's certainly the hard way out. But what else are you going to do? What else is there to do other than to get your money up, get your job up, career up, relationship up, fitness up, and so on and so forth? What else is there to do? Jerk off and watch Disney Plus? It really is like that sometimes. Now, boomers were degenerate, and I'm not trying to give the boomer lecture. And yes, it was easier for them. It is much harder than it once was, and we are getting fucked, and so on and so forth. But fucking take action and do something about it. Get your eyes on the prize. Does bitch moaning get you the prize? No. So get your eyes off of bitch moaning and your eyes on the fucking prize. Is it hard? Is it challenging? Can everyone do it? No. But more people can do it than they think. I'll also say that I speak with passion about this and I speak with aggression about this because it's insufferable to see people just spewing out their poison and infecting people who are otherwise more than capable of ascertaining their dreams. People who just haven't been exposed to a little bit of a more positive environment, a positive internet ecosystem, so to speak. So they are susceptible to the influence of the poison of the internet. There's no shame. I don't shame those people. I don't shame them for falling victim to this. I've fallen victim to this. It happens. It really is time to quit bemoaning the boomers and do something about the current state of affairs. Now, the exact specifics and strategies and all that stuff, I won't get too into because then I'll be taking this too long. But yes, you will need somewhere to live in the meantime while you're saving up for your house. But that always goes back to live fucking cheaply. Rent fucking cheaply. Split a place with a friend. Split a kitchen and a bathroom. Quit living in those fucking 1-bedroom, 1-bathroom apartment complexes with their property managers and all of that shit. I'll also say this. Owning a home is not that great of a deal. Now, I can't really speak to it from experience because I've never owned a home. But, like, people have this weird compulsion with it. They think that that's going to cross them over the edge of, like, they finally made it in the world. And the reality, when you own a home, you're still paying taxes. The maintenance argument's there. And when people try to say that they're going to make money off their property and rent it out and all of that, okay, you and every other house in the neighborhood. So the idea that you're going to make money off of it and then you're going to capitalize on that money, and that's easy overall. It's easy to rent to people and it's easy to deal with that and it's easy to manage your property. That whole idea is fucking nonsense too. So if you're worried about whether or not you're going to own a home, it doesn't fucking matter. All you need is a place to shit and sleep. And you might say, well, then I'm enslaved if I'm renting and all that. If in the absence of grand society, you're a slave to your need to eat and hunt or gather anyway. Working for money and using that money to pay rent and pay for food and all that is the societal equivalent of being a hunter, being a gatherer, and making like mud houses and repairing your mud house all day, every day. So your existence overall is enslaved by what your needs are, not your pleasantries. Your pleasantries you can do without, but you're a slave anyway to what you need. So you might as well just accept that you're going to be in that perpetual state of suffering in that sense and find joy in the suffering in that you can make the rest of your life a mission and you can get the things that you want. So remember, average is fake and made up. Mean, median, and mode are fake and made up. Anscombe's Quartet shows you that all the descriptive statistics can be all nice and cute and dandy, but they can be the same for vastly different sets of data. The data is being skewed by New York and California. You can move. You can get a job elsewhere. Internet content that leads you to believing that there's no hope, there's nothing you could do, and you're in a perpetual state of poorness is toxic and poison, and you need to execute it from your life. You need to let go of the lowest common denominator, the instinct for pleasure, for comfort, for not changing, for doing the bare minimum to get the most results. You need to tame that instinct and bury it deep within yourself so that you have the means and the energy by which to get after what you want in life and to make your moves and to bear the awful displeasure of having to find ways to make money, come up with ideas, make moves, go elsewhere, and so on and so forth. That's the harder thing to do, but that's also the happier, more fulfilled life thing to do than to sulk about it. You can sulk and be comfortable, or you can suffer and be happy. Don't let other people encourage you to commiserate and suck you into their negativity holes, because when people surround each other with the same thoughts, it just convinces them deeper and deeper about those thoughts. People that spit out numbers super fast and Google the first result and highlight are not smart, are not sophisticated, and they're not fucking saying anything intelligible. We can all read numbers. It's a matter of interpreting those numbers correctly. People like that, and especially if their primary means is fucking TikTok, where they have the camera too close to their face and their dirty, disgusting beard and their dirty chest hair and their 12-year-old ball caps, should not be taken seriously. They're nothings, they're nobodies, and they are taking advantage of you. So that's not to shame you. I am shaming these people who promulgate all of this poison. If you're the type of person who feels skeptical whenever they see something like this, trust that, because you are certainly not alone, and I promise you that you're likely right. If you're going with your intuition on things not adding up, or you're going with your intuition that doesn't matter what the prices are, I gotta get it home anyway. So that's what it means to keep your eyes on the prize and find your fulfillment. See through all of this stuff, find a way to get what you want, and fucking execute. That's the Marchese methods. Thanks for tuning in. See you next time.